Hello guys, good morning. Let me try and make last evening's video. So, how are you doing? I'm just fine, thank you. I'm just, you know, having my coffee and I keep messing up my video. So I uploaded it last evening, and I didn't like the result. I want to delete it and I just did that. So, there we go again. Behind me is my library, my collection of Sega Genesis and Mega Drive games. Both NTSC JP, Asian Mega Drive games, US games, Genesis games, and PAL European region games. And today we're going to be talking about blast processing and if that was a real thing. Okay? So let's just pretend people don't know what blast processing was supposed to be. So blast processing was a term that was coined by Sega's marketing team when advertising the Sega Genesis versus the Super Nintendo. So basically what happened is the Super Nintendo comes out, its specs come out, and it turns out that the Sega Genesis is outclassed in pretty much every area, but that one area that was the processor. And it turns out that its processor was actually faster than the Super Nintendo, like almost double the number. Like I might be like remembering this like the wrong way. Was it like a 4 point something for Super Nintendo, or a little bit over 7 for megahertz for the Sega Genesis? It doesn't really matter. I might be remembering this like the wrong way, but you know, Sega found an opportunity there, a small window to attack the Super Nintendo. And they were like, well, our games are a lot faster. We have blast processing, and that means a lot faster games, much more intense games. But was that really a thing? And while I think most of us believe firmly that it was mostly a marketing gimmick, it kind of showed, like sometimes, that Sega did have the faster games. I mean, the Sonic the Hedgehog series were supposed to be fast games, and they felt really fast the way they were built. But then again, you had some situations on the Super Nintendo where it just felt almost like blast processing as well. Like if you have played Super Metroid, and if you have grabbed Samus's boots, speed boots, you know exactly what I'm talking about. But I'm not here to talk about the Genesis debacle of blast processing. I'm here to make it even more complicated because I'm a PAL region gamer. What does that mean is, well, basically, I have PAL region Sega Mega Drive. So the real comparison for me is, first and foremost, Genesis versus Mega Drive, and then Sega Mega Drive versus European Super Nintendo. The PAL European Sega Mega Drive versus the European Super Nintendo. And let me tell you what, in many cases, I feel like we got the short end of the stick here in Europe. And by that I mean, first of all, I don't like the display. I like the US display of 4:3. And, you know, 60 hertz versus 50 hertz, especially on Sega, at least that's my opinion, the comparison was bad. And I'm gonna be starting with those comparisons right now. So the first game that I want to show you is none other than Sonic the Hedgehog, the first Sonic the Hedgehog. So that was supposed to compete with Super Mario World at the time, if I'm not wrong. And it turns out that here in Europe, we were not amazed. And I'll show you why. So this is my Sega Genesis over there. It's not covered by cords and stuff anymore. So I'm gonna be playing that PAL region cartridge on Sega Genesis, and it will work just fine. So let me show you something. Since we're talking fast. Oh, so it started like it was gonna start, but then again, no. There we go. Sega. So this is Sonic the Hedgehog on Sega Genesis. It runs just fine now, doesn't it? Let's play a little bit, just a little bit. Whoa! Now that's what I call blast processing. That's really smooth. Awesome. Woo! So nothing new for you, probably. Yeah, you saw Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. I'm gonna be making a video of that. I'm gonna beat its ass. I know how to do it, like I used to do it some time ago. So yes, we're gonna be trying this now on the console that it was intended to be on, because that's a PAL region cartridge, right? And this is like the European Sega Mega Drive. Let's switch that on. Now this is the Sega Mega Drive, the PAL region console, running the same game. Oh my god, it feels like I'm floating at this point. Do you see that? That is sad. Look at that. No. So, what happened, you may ask? And what happened is, when this game came out in the US, when they had to bring it like overseas here in Europe, they just took the same game, they just slapped a new sticker on it, they didn't do any optimization whatsoever, and just brought it here in Europe. And let me tell you something, with Sonic the Hedgehog, the original one, this one over here, we were not amazed here in Europe. So yeah, blast processing on Genesis, but Mega Drive not so much. Granted, things changed a lot in the sequel, and in number 3 and Sonic and Knuckles, these games run almost identical as far as, you know, as my naked eye can see and feel, my senses can feel on both the Sega Mega Drive and the Sega Genesis. But, you know, that first one hit hard. And let's do some more comparisons, like on the European region, like Sega Mega Drive, European down there, versus my covered Super Nintendo over there. And we'll do comparisons on games that are more or less identical. You know, they're not exactly the same. There's still some differences, obviously, but, you know, at least they're the exact same game that were supposed to be the exact same game. We're not trying to compare here Aladdin on Sega Genesis versus Aladdin on the Super Nintendo, because that would be totally unfair. They're completely different games. Even me mentioning that this competes with Super Mario World normally shouldn't end up in any comparison of these two games, because they're completely different. What I wanted to stress out is that this was Sega's flagship mascot game, and Super Mario World on the Super Nintendo was the exact same thing for Super Nintendo. So if you had to choose between those two, the European one versus the Super Nintendo one on the European one, and let me tell you what, there are basically almost no differences on Super Nintendo PAL version. If you want to see that, I'll gladly even make a playthrough about it, and I'll gladly play through the Super Nintendo 50 Hz Super Mario World if you like that. But believe me when I say that Super Nintendo US versus PAL Super Mario World is almost identical. Like they're like, you have to get them like back to back at the same time playing to even see differences. So next up, as an originalist, I have to do this like on real hardware. So I'll try to be playing games that I have in my collection, and, you know, not try to compare this emulation versus emulation, because it would be totally unfair. Honestly, even most of the comparisons being done on the internet right now, emulation versus emulation, it's always US versus US, which kind of defeats the purpose. I need to do this like PAL versus PAL. and on real hardware how it's supposed to be. I don't trust emulation that much, especially with that department. So the first game we're going to be comparing is Super Street Fighter 2 for both the Super Nintendo and the Sega Mega Drive, not Genesis, Mega Drive, and see how that works, because those games are supposedly almost identical. Yes, I'm not going to be addressing, the fact that this one has better use of colors or sound. That's beyond our point at this point. So we're going to be comparing those first, because I believe Street Fighter in general has had a huge impact on gaming industry and on sales of both these systems. So it will be essential to just see how a game that was really good in sales did performed in both of these consoles. So Super Nintendo PAL version versus Super Street Fighter 2, sorry, on PAL region Super Nintendo versus Super Street Fighter 2 on PAL region Mega Drive. Let's go. Okay, I'm switching on the consoles right now. That's a Super Nintendo. That's the Sega Genesis. The sound is not loud enough. Okay, so what we're gonna be doing is playing just one fight to see how that works. All right. Let me just. I muted the Super Nintendo one. Let's try this. Gonna pick our boy Ryu, of course.
Round one, fight.
Okay, that was one round. Let's go on the Super Nintendo. Okay, Super Nintendo now. Again, our boy Ryu. I don't know. Who has blast processing now? I don't know. I seriously think there's no contest between these two. Super Street Fighter 2 on Sega Mega Drive is slow. It almost feels as if it has slowdown. Yeah, what most people talk about versus the Super Nintendo in the US area. They're like, oh, your system has slowdown. It almost feels as if in this case, the one with slowdown is the one that can handle the Super Street Fighter 2, even we know that's not true. It's the Sega Mega Drive. It's actually slow. It's very slow. But let's move on to one of my other fighting gaming loves of all time. So now, how about we compare Mortal Kombat 2 on Sega Mega Drive, European Mega Drive versus PAL Super Nintendo? Well, PAL, this is going to be a blast. Let me take a look at that. So there we go. Both systems running Mortal Kombat 2. Alright, both systems run Mortal Kombat 2. Let's play this first, let's play around, or maybe a couple. Maybe have a full fight, see fatality. Yeah, that's the Super Nintendo over there. I might mute that. Where's my controller? Shut up, Super Nintendo. I actually prefer the Mega Drive sound on this one. Okay. Okay. Fix that. There we go. Oh, what happened? Oh, it doesn't display like that? It doesn't. Okay, sorry about that. Alright. Okay, we're not here to compare the sound effects or the graphics, which for some reason, I like the graphics a little bit better on the Mega Drive rather than the Super Nintendo. There we go. I didn't hear the old well. Okay, that's the Mega Drive version. And let's try the Super Nintendo. European Super Nintendo. Let's go. I know I'm rocking your world right now. I know I am. I know. So I have even Mortal Kombat 3 that, those two are comparable as well. If you want to see more of that, just ask me. So I just gave you a few examples as to why I don't think we got blast processing here in Europe. There's plenty of occasions where key games were actually faster and smoother on the Super Nintendo. I played that shit a lot. Mortal Kombat 2 on the Super Nintendo, and is leaps and bounds faster and smoother than the Mega Drive counterpart. Super Street Fighter 2 as well. Those were key games back in the day. They sold above million, I'm pretty sure above 1 million of copies, even more than that. I'm pretty sure Street Fighter in general sold really well. Yeah, I mean, those are key games. You can't ignore them. And even if you go and try to gloss over that, then you're gonna jump into a very dangerous area of comparing games that are not the same. So trying to say that Super Nintendo is slow and Sega Genesis was fast, well, it's debatable if we're talking about the Genesis specifically, and still debatable, but European Super Nintendo versus Mega Drive, there's no comparison. So if you're asking a PAL region gamer, they will most likely tell you that blast processing was just a gimmick. So that was my video. Hope you enjoyed it. I'll be back with more, and I'll be back beating the ass of TMNT on NES because I fucking rock. So thanks for watching, guys. Have a good one.